Hey guys, this is Ron. So previously we've talked about building our program as if it's going to be run in somebody else's program. So it's going to be imported and used in that way. Well, we can also import things into our program. And the great thing about Python is there's a ton of code out there. There's a ton of modules out there that we can download and we can use. Well, just by the mere fact that you installed Python, you got a ton of modules that have a ton of useful code in there. So now it gets even easier for you to bang out some code and get some real functionality. So in this section, I'd like to talk a little bit about how you utilize some of those modules, how you bring them into your program, how you might execute them from the command line, things like that. So I'm in Python here, idle, and so if we run a help, what we'll find is it talks about to get a list of available modules, blah blah blah, you can type in modules. So we'll do that. And so it builds a list for us. And as you can see, this list is pretty full, right? There's all kinds of different modules in here. And these are all built into Python. You didn't have to do anything to go out and get them, but you got them. And so you can check out what some of these modules can do. There's all sorts of different documentation out there. So I did a quick search on the web here, and so there's various articles about, hey, which Python libraries do you find to be most useful, right? So we've got requests. I've used that one quite a few times. It becomes quite handy. You got Scrapy. I haven't really used that much. I use different modules in order to pull it. I might use requests to go out and pull stuff off of the web, but then I'll use, let's say, Beautiful Soup in order to parse through that and pull out things I think are important. I've heard people talk about Pillow. I tend to not to do a whole lot of image stuff with Python, but it's there. NumPy, I've always heard great things about. If you want to do some real scientific stuff with your code and you need some real push with efficiency because you have a whole lot of data to carve through, I've always heard great things about NumPy, and some of the modules and methods that are within there are really efficient at carving through data. And so again, I've heard great things about that. I haven't used Pygame. I've seen other people code with Pygame and do little games with it. PyQt, you can basically write GUIs and stuff like that. I have not delved into building GUIs. For me, that depend upon what my programs are doing. It's either going to be a GUI, or it's either going to be command line, or it's going to be web-based. And so I just haven't had a real need to do GUIs. Scapy's kind of neat. You can do all sorts of different things with packets. So for me, I tend to do different things with networking, and so Scapy comes in handy from time to time. And that's pretty much on this list. Let's see, useful modules. Again, we have all sorts of different types of modules that you can do. So they've got SQL Alchemy, this and that. I haven't used those. There is a module for MySQL that you can import, and I've used that in the past to actually interface with SQL databases. Again, more references to some of the GUIs, consoles. You can do audio stuff with it, image manipulation, more networking kind of stuff. Let's see, moving on. So again, there's all sorts of different modules that you can use, and so there are lists out there that are going to help you figure out which ones will work best for what you're trying to do. Let's see, best Python libraries. Again, you find requests and Beautiful Soup, so those are very handy. NumPy. Let's see, and it's a pretty small list, but either way, there's lots of documentation out there that is going to help you point you in the right direction on which modules to use. So in our case, we'll just walk through a couple of these modules that I think are pretty neat, or at least we'll show you how to bring them into your program and kind of explore what they have to offer. So I'm going to quit out of here. I'm back at my prompt here, and so I'm going to import math. And so that's all I have to do to import the math module. And so if I do a dir, I'll see that I do in fact have math down here. So if I do a dir on math, what I'll find is now I have access to all of the methods that are within the math module. And so let's say if I want to do the square root of something, all I have to do is math.sqrt, and I'll pass it some value, so 25. And so I get the square root of 25. So I didn't have to write any of this code, but because it's already built in here, all I had to do was import it and then run the module that I wanted. What would happen if all I wanted was a single portion of this? I didn't want to have every one. Again, I want to keep my code clean. I just want the square root. So there's a couple things that I can do. So if we go back to help again, I'm going to do a help on, let's say, there's a module called copy. And so in copy, I'm going to do a copy.deepCopy. So this is if I wanted to copy one list into another list, this might be one method that I might do. But instead of typing copy.deepCopy, I don't want to have to do all that. So I'm going to from copy import deep copy. So now when I do a dir, instead of having the entire copy module, instead all I have is the deep copy method. And so now if I do a list, I'll just do an L1 for list 1 equals, we'll do 1, 2, 3. And so I have that I want to copy into L2. I'm going to do L2 equals deep copy, and I'll give it L1. And now L2 is a copy of L1, but because it's a deep copy, just like in our previous sections of this tutorial, I can just change one of these values. So I changed that first value, but it doesn't change the other list. So in one of our other videos, we had real issues with when we changed one list that was based off another list, because they both reference the same point in memory. We had problems because they would both get changed. But with deep copy, we don't have to worry about that. It actually worries about, hey, I'm going to create a whole new variable with its own address spaces, and I'm just going to take the values within L1 and copy them over. And so again, the important thing here is that, again, instead of copying the entire module like we did with math here, we can copy just the method within there that we want, and then we can reference it on its own. Instead of having to do math.square root, we can just do a deep copy rather than copy.deep copy. Well, what else do we have that we could check out? So if I run the help here, and I'm going to look up the time module. The time module gives us all sorts of different ways to represent actual time. And so we'll take some time to explore that. I know that got a little crazy there. But time.time is going to return the current time in seconds since the epoch as a float. So this is going to be a really big decimal number or a float, right? So that you're going to represent the number of seconds since epoch. And epoch is like some time, again, I think it's system dependent, but for Linux it's sometime in 1970 when I guess Linux was born, or I don't know. There's some huge story in it, right? I don't pay that much attention here. But if I quit out, one thing that I can do is I can import, or let's do a from time import time. So I'm just going to get that time method, but instead of calling it time, I'm going to call it t. And while this probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense this way, I have basically renamed the time method just t. So now whenever I run t, I'm going to get the number of seconds since epoch, right? So as you can see here, we have a little bit of control over how these modules get imported. I can, if I can find it up here, probably not. It's probably buried a little bit. Oh, there it is. So I can import the entire module, or I can import a method within that module, or I can import that method from that module, but I'm going to rename it to whatever I think makes more sense, right? And so T allowed me to do some kind of shorthand here, but I wouldn't advise doing that because, hey, maybe somebody's coming in after you and has to look at your code and they see all these T's all over the place and they're like, what the heck does this refer to? Instead of just time, right? But there are some modules, like we talked about, Beautiful Soup. That's kind of a lot of typing, right? So I've seen a lot of people shorten that to just BS, right? So Beautiful Soup equals BS, right? So it reduces the amount they have to type, but they can still figure out that it's really just Beautiful Soup. Or I think sometimes they do it as BS4 because that's the version, I guess, that Beautiful Soup is running. But either way, as you can see, you have lots of different options, and so go ahead and play around with it. Check out the different modules that are built in. There's lots of write-ups on the web to which ones are more valuable than others. As we go through this tutorial, we'll begin using a few of them, but now you have the basics on how to import it. Well, another way that you can go about doing this is to run some of these modules from the command line. And so all you would have to do is Python -m for module, and then type in the module that you want. So I happen to be in my tutorials folder with my greeting.py that we used earlier. So one of the modules I'm going to run is our web server. So Python's pretty cool that it does have a very, very simple web server that's kind of built into it. So we can do a Python -m, and it's just simple HTTP server. All right, and so it's a small m, not a big M, so let's try that. All right, so now it is serving HTTP on quad 0, so that means every port, and port 8000. So let me bring my browser back up, and hopefully my system will allow for it. We'll just do a HTTP //127.0.0.1 port 8000. And guess what we get? We get our greeting.py. Why? Because that happens to be in the folder that I launched the simple HTTP server from. So when I click on it, hey, guess what? I can see the code that we wrote in the last sample the last example, because again, it's just a text file. So my browser just displays it. So as you can see, the whole point was that it's real easy to get some of these modules up and running. So all I had to do is attack M and specify the module. Now this module actually launches a web server, and so it gives me a little information about it. So 127.0.0.1 came to me at this time. It did a GET request. I gave it a code 200 saying, yep, it was valid find. Then I did a GET request for favicon, which is pretty standard when you launch a web page. I think the favicon is what ends up getting displayed up here. but because I don't have a favicon in there, it got a 404 not found. Then I did a request for greeting.py, and I said, sure, yeah, I found it, a 200. So as you can see, again, we have lots of options on how we want to use our modules. You don't typically execute them directly from the command line here, but we'll see there are a number of modules that we will do this with. One that I can think of offhand is the Python debugger. So if we have a piece of software that I can't quite figure out why it's not running correctly, I can use the Python debugger here in order to launch my program but allow me to step through it. So again, I hope you got something out of this video. Modules are built into Python, and you can bring in others that aren't there by default, and it just kind of makes your life a little easier, because again, you don't have to write all that code. The code is there available, ready for you to use. So thanks for watching. Bye. Hey guys, this is Ron. So we've talked a little bit about the structure of your program and why it's important to kind of lay it out in certain ways, because you might want to import somebody else's code into your program, or you might want to place your program in someone else's, and so on and so forth. Well, how does that process actually work? How do we basically import modules into our code? So that's what this section of the tutorial is going to cover, is how do we bring in other pieces of code and be able to use it in ours. So if you didn't know, Python comes with all sorts of different modules by default. So you didn't have to do anything to get these modules. They were just built in when you installed Python. So to find them, we can go to the help menu here, and we can type in modules. And so what it's going to do is look to see what's within the Python directories, and it's basically going to build this list of all the different modules that we might want to use within our code. And again, there's so many here that come built into Python that's where Python gets some of its power from, is all of this code at your disposal that makes getting your program up and running very quickly. So we obviously can't go through every one of these modules. There's just way too many to list. But I can point out a few that I've found to be useful. So without scrolling the screen here, I'll look to see what I've got written here to the side. There is an OS module that I've used quite a bit. I've used the pickle module. That will help you if you, let's say, in one of our previous tutorials, we had made a dictionary, and our dictionary held all sorts of grades for our students. Well, that's all fine and dandy until you want to close your program and you got to figure out, what do I do with all this data? Pickle will enable you to take that actual dictionary and save it to a text file, and then when you open your program back up, it can pull all of that data back out of a text file, and now it's ready to use. Your dictionary is ready to go, just as if you had just built it. So pretty handy module that doesn't require you to save a bunch of stuff to a full-on database. Now there's another module called PDB. We'll explore this a little bit later. It is the Python debugger, and it'll help you find errors in your code. There's the copy module. We'll explore that here in a second. We've got Scapy, NumPy, Operator, Time, argparse, String, Request, Beautiful Soup, and so many more that, again, you can just import, use the code in there, and quickly get your program up and running with some advanced functionality. So how does that really work? So we'll quit out of here, and we'll just import. So we're going to stick with one that's kind of simple. We're going to go with the math module. So we'll just import math. All right, so pretty simple. So if I do a dir now, I'll find that I have this math module. So if I do a dir now on math, what I'll find is there's all these built-in methods, ready to go, ready to be used. So let's say I wanted to use the square root module. All I have to do is do math.square root, pass it a number, and I get the square root, right? So again, I didn't have to write anything advanced in order to do that. All I had to do is import the math module and then call math.square root. Okay, so pretty cool. Now, if you'll remember from one of our other lessons, we talked about there's some issues with lists, and because they're mutable, when we try to copy one list into another list, oftentimes all it does is copies a memory address of the first list into the second list. So whenever you modify either one of the lists, both lists change. And so to get around that, we did a for loop to copy the data out of one list into another list. So we manually copied everything over rather than relying on Python to do it for us. Well, there's a module called copy. So if I do a help and I type in copy for the copy module, what I'll find is there is a method in here called deep copy. So it's going to make a deep copy of Y, and if we kind of slide down, hopefully it will actually break it out for us. So there's only two functions in here. I keep calling them methods, but anyway, so we have deep copy. We're going to pass it some type of object, and it's going to do a deep copy of what's inside that object and copy it into another object. So for us, if we created a list called L1, we'll just give it 1, 2, and 3. We'll keep things simple. All right. Oh, I'm still in the help command. Sorry about that. So L1 equals, and we'll do 1, 2, 3. All right. So we have our list. And now we want to do a deep copy. So I'm going to from copy import deep copy. So instead of importing the entire copy module, I'm only bringing in the deep copy method. So if I do a dir, I'll see that I have this deep copy method, right? So if I do a L2 for my list2 equals deep copy L1. Now I have L2 and it equals exactly what was inside of L1. But if I change one of the values, let's say I want to change this very first value, and I'm going to give it the value of 5. So now L2 equals 5, 2, and 3. If I check out L1, it's still what it was originally, which is what we were trying to avoid back when we did just L2 equals L1. So in this case, we did a deep copy, and that hooked us up with making sure they didn't copy memory addresses. It made a whole new variable. But we didn't have to import, again, the whole copy module. We just imported deep copy by doing from copy import deep copy. And we didn't have to write this deep copy method. Again, it's already built in. It comes with Python, and you can use it as much as you want. So the last module we're going to kind of look at within idle here is time. So if I do a help, I'm going to do it at time.time. So this is a method, and it's not going to let me do that. So let's just do help. We'll do, I know why it's not going to let me do that, because I haven't imported time yet. So I'll just do time from here. And what we'll see is I have this time method or function, and it's going to return the current time in seconds since the epoch. So I'm running Linux, so the epoch is sometime in like 1970 or something like that. So maybe not a hugely valuable number right off the bat, but when we start comparing it to other events, being able to compare seconds to seconds sometimes makes it real easy to see which one happened before the other event, right? So I'm going to do this one a little bit differently. I'm going to also do a from time import time. So this is the time module. This is the time function or method within the module. And then I'm going to do an as t. Now you probably shouldn't name your variables something small like that because it's not very descriptive at all. But for my case, the point I'm trying to drive home is that I have renamed the time module as t. So when I do a dir, instead of seeing time, I just see t. And again, this might be just so that I can shorthand something. I don't have to write out the whole thing. So there are modules that are pretty long in name. I'm thinking of Beautiful Soup is one. So a lot of people will shorten that down to BS or BS4. So in my case, again, all I did was shorten time down to t. And so all I have to do now is execute t. And I get the number of seconds since epoch, right? So pretty cool. So again, we looked at 3 different ways for utilizing some of the built-in modules. We did a full-on import, just an import whatever. I think we import math, which is why we ended up with the entire math module here. Then we did from copy import deep copy, which is why we got the deep copy method here. And then we did from time import time as t, so that I could name it something that I want to refer to when I execute it, right? Well, this isn't the only way to do modules. The other way we can do is to actually run it from the command line. So if I exit here, I can do a Python -m for module, and then I can specify the module name that I want to run. So in my case, I happen to know there's a module called Simple HTTP Server. And what this does is launches a web server, and again, a very limited web server, but a web server nonetheless. And it hosts everything in my current working directory. So here I've launched HTTP on quad 0, which means all of my ports, or all of my IP addresses, port 8000. So if I bring up my web here, I've kind of brought up a couple web pages here that talk about a couple different modules that people find handy. So like the request module is great. Pillow, I don't do a whole lot with imaging. Beautiful Soup, this is a great little module that will help you parse through HTML. So we can request a web page with requests and then use Beautiful Soup to parse through it and find the different things we need. NumPy, really powerful library. It allows you to do some mathematical functions, but I've seen a lot of people use some of these modules that are written really well to parse through lots of data sets very efficiently and very quickly. If you want to write games, there's Pygames, there's some GUI stuff, and so on and so forth. So there's all sorts of different modules, and you can find all sorts of different write-ups on why people find them to be useful. Again, some of the ones I mentioned earlier, I use on a pretty regular basis. But the point here that we were trying to go for is that we can launch our web server, or we already launched our web server, port 8000. And so everything that was in that folder, which was the file that we wrote in one of the previous lessons, is automatically hosted on a web server. So I oftentimes use this for transferring files, or for just quickly hosting something so that somebody else can download it from me. It's just really useful that in like a one-liner, I've got a web server up and running. There's no authentication needed. They can just jump right in, grab what they need, and go. So in this case, I launched it with just a -m simple HTTP server. Once I loaded it up in my browser, I did a GET request for that. I got a 200 back. I requested the copy of greeting. I got a 200 for that, so it came back. So again, I didn't have to do much, but Python has that built into it. And again, it's just one more aspect of Python that I really enjoy. So I'm just going to cancel out and keyboard interrupt that. So I hope you got something out of this, that there are tons of different modules that you can use. There's multiple ways of importing them depending upon if you want to pull the whole module, a piece of the module, and oh, by the way, do you want to rename it when you bring it in? And then again, you can always run them from the command line, assuming that module is built to do that. So a simple HTTP server is built to do that. There's a couple other modules. When we do Python debugging, so PDB, again, we'll run that from the command line here as well, so that we can pass it our program and start stepping through it. So again, hope you found something valuable, and I thank you for watching.